Power paddles made a huge splash in pickleball last year. Unfortunately, they were also marred with some controversy, but now that we've finally gotten some stability with power paddles, it's time to name our top 5. Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets Runners. So when talking about the best power paddles, there are a few things we need to set straight right away, starting with eligibility to make the list. There are a lot of paddles that I tested last year that aren't going to be eligible, and I'm sure you can guess a few of them, starting with the original Gen 3 Joolas. It kind of goes without saying, as good as they were, they're not around anymore, so they're not getting anywhere near this list. Now the mod TAs won't be making the list either, and that's because they're being delisted or sunset later on this year. To be honest, the mods were so similar to the original Gen 3s that I don't really know how they were approved. Probably just Joola asking USAP for a favor so their pros could still use them. But yeah, those aren't going to be around for much longer. The 3S paddles won't make this list either. Those are just UPAA approved, which is fine, but to make this list, you have to be sanctioned for any tournament, so you got to be USA approved as well. Now, it's not just the mods that are getting delisted later on this year. The original Gearbox Pro Power Elongated is also getting sunset on July 1st, as well as the Pro Connects Black Ace paddles. Now we don't carry the Black Aces, so even if they were still legal, they wouldn't make the list, which brings me nicely to my next point that I make in all these top 5s and tier list videos. I can only rank paddles that we carry at the store. Those are the only paddles I test, but we are always looking to bring in more stuff, so if you have any suggestions, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments below. The other thing we need to talk about is how I'm actually judging these paddles, because what makes one power paddle better than the other? The logical answer to that would be it's more powerful, but that's not how I'm looking at it. When ranking these paddles, yes, their power is going to be an important factor that I value quite highly, but I'm also going to be looking at their overall performance. So if a paddle is super powerful, but it's totally uncontrollable and it has no spin, it's not going to make the list, even if it's the most powerful paddle in the world. I hope that makes sense. One of the key issues with these new generation power paddles is that because they're so powerful, they're quite difficult to control. If you did think this was going to be an all-out power list, there may be some surprising paddles here, and I'm also going to include some honorable mentions to explain why some potentially more powerful paddles didn't quite make it. All the paddles in this top 5 have a way of mitigating that harder to control factor, which that one paddle in the honorable mentions section I don't think is quite as good at. There's also something that I really need to emphasize here. Power paddles have a certain allure to them. I totally get that. But you always need to remember that control is still king in this sport. The biggest skill gap is what goes on in the kitchen. If you can't control the ball, your opponent's going to figure that out, and you can hit with all the power you want. They're just going to burn you with control. So do tread carefully with these paddles. I will talk about how each of them does in terms of control and which paddles might be easier to control for different types of players. This is also going to be a good video for those of you who have been waiting on some updates regarding break-in period and lead tape, because again, there are going to be some surprises in here, especially considering what I said about some of these paddles in their reviews. We're going to get into it now, but before that, let me just remind you, as usual, that any of the paddles we talk about here today, you can check out on our website, racketsandrunners.ca. Also, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me and the store on Instagram, and let me know in the comment section what you want me to cover next. I wanted to do honorable mentions first this time. I don't really know why, and I'm actually going to start with probably the most controversial omission from this list, the Paddletech Bantam TKOC in either thickness. Now, I do think this is a great paddle, and of course it's insanely powerful, and actually with the overall decrease in power that the industry has seen recently, this would fall somewhere between 2 and 3 on this list in terms of pure power. The issue I have with this paddle is its ability to control the ball. Now, again, it's not bad. Christian Alshon plays with this at an extremely high level, so it definitely can be controlled. It's just that relative to the competition, it is a little bit more difficult. That goes for both thicknesses, by the way. I mostly use this thicker one so that I can get a little bit more control, and it is still lacking here. There are 2 reasons for that. One, it's a stiff paddle, not a springy trampoline effect paddle, so it's powerful without that element of dwell time, which I'll talk about later is very important to help control some of the other paddles on this list. The other thing is spin. I don't know exactly why spin is lacking here, but I think it's one, because this paddle isn't thermoformed, so it doesn't have that one-to-one transfer of spin, and 2, it doesn't have that dwell time to shape the ball. I just don't get the same purchase over the ball with this paddle that I get on all the others, so I feel like I'm always a little on edge with my drives that they're going to go too deep. Now again, this is not a bad power paddle, and it would easily have been in 6th place if I did make a top 6, but I do think it is a noticeable level below those other 5 in terms of that ability to control it. I'm also going to talk about another firm power paddle later on in this video that I think is actually better for both control and spin, and I'll talk about why when we get there. The other honorable mention here is the Honolulu Pickleball J2K Plus. Now, small asterisk here, I haven't fully broken it in, and where this paddle is right now, it's just not powerful enough to compete with the top 5 and even the Bantam. I am being a little bit unfair with it because I know it's supposed to get more powerful over time, and the paddle I've got at number 5 I actually am judging after its break-in period, so let's talk about that one now. This one is definitely going to surprise some of you because when I reviewed it, I actually said it wasn't that powerful, but since then I've broken it in and it definitely has gotten to what John Q called the Goldilocks stage. It's the Pickleball Apes Pulse. I've gone with the Pulse S. The Pulse E is more powerful because it's longer, but this is just a much more well-rounded shape. I don't really think players need paddles longer than 16.5 inches anymore. But yeah, let's talk about the Pulse, specifically a broken-in Pulse, because power has increased a lot since I tested it new. A brand new Pulse actually feels pretty firm despite its Gen 3 construction with a much thicker foam layer, and because it's firm, it doesn't have much trampoline effect. Once it breaks in, this paddle basically becomes as soft as foam paddles like the Joolas and the Gearboxes, and you definitely get some trampoline effect at that point. It's not nearly as much trampoline effect as top tier power paddles, and this paddle is honestly quite a bit less powerful than the Bantam, but it still packs a really solid punch both in terms of pop and power. You just get that little extra point ending help that you want in a power paddle, but because the power isn't over the top, it's also much easier to control. It doesn't have that wild springy feel to it, so you're not working against the paddle in the control game. It's still cushioning the ball and helping you out. And this is more of a muted soft feel for those of you who like that. That means the sweet spot's quite big and the paddle face isn't too punishing when you make contact off center. So this is definitely one of the more forgiving power paddles in the soft game. Then you've got spin, which is also great. I'm going to talk about spin a lot today because spin is such a crucial part of controlling these power paddles. And here you've got that long dwell time with a blended Kevlar and carbon top sheet, so spin is top tier. The fact that it's a hybrid paddle also helps with spin, especially for soft spin because it is a little bit easier to maneuver and roll over the ball. So yeah, the Pulse S is 5th. I wouldn't have predicted that when I played this paddle new a few months ago, but once this paddle's broken in, it's definitely way up there in terms of power, and all its other attributes make it one of the most well-rounded paddles on this list. This is the one I would recommend, especially if you're not sure that you can handle a top-tier power paddle, because this gives you plenty of power without too big of a sacrifice in easy control. Keyword being easy, we'll talk more about that later. Now at number 4, we have probably an even bigger surprise, because if you watched my review of this paddle last week, you'll know that I wasn't that big of a fan, but then I customized it. Coming in at number 4, we have the Carbon True Foam Genesis 1. Okay, let me explain. I'm not going to say I was wrong about this paddle because it's really not that impressive in stock form, but then I talked to Chris from Pickleball Studio. He said, dude, trust me, it's so much better if you add weight, so I did. And yeah, it is. You can see all the weight I added here. It's about 0.4 ounces heavier in stock form. But before we talk about all the improvements, let me first go over the issues I had with this paddle in stock form. The biggest issue I had with this paddle in stock form was that it had a really mushy, pillowy feel, which made me feel totally disconnected to where the ball was during dwell time. My theory is that because it's a full foam core, there's nothing pushing back onto the ball. On foam paddles that have a honeycomb core, you feel this firmer element of pushback, giving you a nice, responsive, crisp feel when the ball leaves the paddle face. That's also why I thought power was a little lacking. It was so soft and mushy that the ball lost a lot of its energy during dwell time. Now, it was still more powerful than average, but not high compared to true power paddles. So lacking feel and lacking power, I struggled in pretty much every department, especially control because I'm so dependent on feel for control. But then I added lead tape and that completely transformed it. It's still soft, but because there's more mass pushing into the ball, you actually do get that feeling that there's something backing up that softness. It's not mushy anymore. It's almost like the lead is adding that feel element that you get from the honeycomb core and other paddles. There's basically some substance to that super soft foam feel, which was so lacking in stock form. Now that was huge for me because I instantly felt more connected to the ball, which most importantly, before we even talk about power, made this paddle way better in the soft game. Like I said, a paddle can be as soft as it wants. If I don't feel the ball, I'm not going to be confident in the soft game. So because that lead helped improve the feel, I became a lot more confident. Now I know this isn't a control video, but one more comment about control. True foam doesn't have a ton of trampoline effect, so it doesn't really have that difficulty factor in the soft game that a lot of the other paddles on this list have. Now, soft without much trampoline effect, that doesn't sound very powerful. How is this the 4th best power paddle? Well, it doesn't have much trampoline effect, but it still has some. Carbon developed true foam so that you don't get that uncontrollably springy feel in the touch game, but you do get some trampoline effect when you accelerate the paddle face. Basically, you get more power when you're looking for it. Now, that minimal trampoline effect wouldn't have been enough on its own to put the paddle in the top 5, but the other major benefit I got from adding weight was increased plow through. There's more mass punching through the ball, which helps to generate more power. That extra mass also means that you don't have to generate as much paddle head speed to tap into its trampoline effect. Don't worry, it's still very easy to control, but you get that boost in power a little bit earlier, which is really beneficial for pop on more compact strokes. Now, judging this paddle with weight may sound a little bit unfair. Most paddles benefit from lead tape, but this is really the first paddle where I'm like, yeah, this is a completely different experience with lead. It goes from being maybe a B tier paddle without it to definitely an S tier paddle with it. Elite control, spin, I already talked about in the review, is top tier, and now really, really good power. Only 4th though for power, because it's not as high as the top 3. Coming in at number 3, we have a paddle that you haven't actually seen on this channel yet, because we only recently brought it in, but now that we did, I fully understand the hype. The Spartus Olympus. I've been playing with this paddle a lot over the past month, and I am a huge fan. This is by far my favorite hybrid paddle right now. I don't usually mesh that well with hybrid paddles because they lack leverage, especially for power and stability on big drives, but because this paddle is so powerful, it actually makes up for that loss in leverage. Now, this is a pretty different paddle to the other 4 on this list. The Pulse, the Genesis, and paddles 1 and 2, they all have a long dwell time with some form of trampoline effect. This is a firm paddle that doesn't have a ton of dwell time. Earlier, when I was talking about the Bantam and said there was going to be another firm, powerful paddle on this list, this is the one I was talking about. Now, the question is, without a long dwell time and trampoline effect, how is this paddle so powerful? The Olympus has a very unique feel to it. It's firm, but actually does have this really cool poppy springiness to it. It's not trampoline-y, or if it is, think of it more like the springboard that gymnasts jump off of before doing their flips. It's way firmer than like a backyard trampoline. The ball doesn't sink into the paddle face here nearly as much, but it still loads up on some extra power to the point where this is super poppy and also has plenty of top-end power. Its pop is definitely more impressive than its power. Again, it is a shorter paddle, and that firmer springboard feel is more effective on compact strokes, but this has plenty of power from the baseline too. Don't worry about that. Now, this paddle is so unique that really the only other paddle that I've tested that's anything sort of similar to it is the Bantam, which has that same short dwell time and really powerful feel. I've put this paddle ahead of the Bantam because it actually has a little bit more inherent pop, and because it's actually easier to control. I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but it's easier to control for 3 reasons. It has a more connected feel, it's more spin friendly, and it's shorter. We'll start with feel, and to be honest, this might be my favorite paddle in terms of feel right now. I tend to prefer a firm feel. That's why the Ripple was my favorite foam paddle when I tested it back in the day. And for me, this combination of crisp, springy firmness is just the holy grail for feedback. The Bantam doesn't have that same ultra-precise feedback to it, I think probably because it's not thermoformed. And like I've said a bunch of times on this channel, good feedback is a great way to get dialed into the control game. I feel the ball so well with this paddle that despite its inherent power, I'm still super confident on any type of touch shot. Drops, dinks, resets, you name it, I love this paddle. Then you've got spin, which is off the charts. So much purchase over the ball thanks to that springier feel. And then the hybrid shape is so good for spin variety, which I already talked about with the Pulse S. This is just a phenomenal paddle. I'm gonna try some lead tape combinations, and I might have to make an update video in the future because this may become my next paddle of choice. I have rarely meshed with a paddle this well, this quickly. We're into the top 2, and these last 2 are really in a tier of their own in terms of power. They're by far the most powerful paddles on this list, although ironically, a little bit less powerful than their predecessors. I'm not gonna ruin number 1 yet, although you can probably guess it after I tell you what number 2 is. Coming in at number 2, we have the Gearbox Pro Power Ultimate Elongated. It's Pro Ultimate Power, isn't it? Okay, coming in at number 2, we have the Gearbox Pro Ultimate Power Elongated. Obnoxiously long name. Now, this replaces the standard Pro Power Elongated, which, like I said, will be sunset on July 1st, And yes, this is noticeably less powerful, which is actually a good thing. The reason those paddles are getting sunset is because they pushed power a little bit too far, and realistically, you don't need that much power. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the details about what they did to make this paddle less powerful, but the gist of it is it's a bit softer, a bit more muted, and it has a little bit less of that in-your-face trampoline effect. With that said, this is still very, very powerful. This has a floating core surrounded by foam, so we're into the territory of proper trampoline effect paddles here. No one in their right mind is going to use this and say, I don't have enough power. If you do, the only thing I can say to you is that, unfortunately, you've become a little bit too reliant on a paddle's inherent power. Now, of course, with less power, you do gain in a lot of other performance metrics. Because this paddle is softer and more muted, it's a lot easier to control. The sweet spot's bigger, the paddle face is much more forgiving, and when you are hitting a touch shot, you're much less likely to accidentally pop it up. That being said, 2 seconds ago I said that we are now firmly into the category of big-time trampoline effect paddles, which brings me to a very, very important point. This paddle might be a little bit easier to control than its predecessor, but this is still a really tough paddle to control. With trampoline effect comes a huge risk factor when you're hitting a touch shot. This paddle adds power to every ball you hit, including touch shots. So players need to understand that to control this paddle, and the next one on this list, you gotta have really good feel and soft hands yourself. Fortunately, one of the outstanding characteristics of a trampoline effect foam paddle like this is ball feel. Foam creates an extended dwell time, and the spring effect you get makes for this very unique and very positive feedback, almost like strings in a tennis racket. So amazing feel here, and that allows you to develop trust in your paddle so that even if it does add power onto the ball, you know exactly what to do to control it. Because of that, good players will find them maybe not easier to control than a lot of other paddles, but definitely more addictive in the control game. That's also why I recommend this paddle with a massive asterisk. This has a steep learning curve, and if you are new to pickleball, I would highly recommend getting something that will help you in the soft game, because that's what you need to develop first. If you are an advanced player though, this is a fantastic paddle with huge top end power, and that power can be really deadly when you use it properly. Alright, we've finally made our way to number 1, and I'm sure you've guessed it, the Joola Pro 4 series. Whichever one you want, Perseus, Agassi, and I'm sure the other ones that are coming out are going to be great as well. I know I said that the Agassi is a little bit more controlled than the Perseus, but they're still both fantastic power paddles. Now, it's a similar story comparing the Pro 4s to the Mod TAs and the Gen 3s as it was comparing the Pro Ultimate Power to the Pro Powers. These are a little bit less powerful, but still very, very powerful. Unlike the Pro Ultimate though, these actually have a slightly more crisp feel than their predecessors. Remember, I said the Pro Ultimate was actually softer and more muted. There's less dwell time on the Pro 4s compared to the mods, so they have a little bit less trampoline effect, which is how Joola lowered their power. That also means the improvements in control are a little bit different to the way control improved on the Pro Ultimate. Instead of a plusher feel, these are more controlled because they feel a bit more solid and consistent. I'm just a little bit more confident in the control game with these paddles compared to the Gen 3 Joolas. It's almost like their construction is more premium, which does make sense. Joola has made some major durability claims with these, so maybe they just manufactured them a bit better. Now again, this is still a massive trampoline effect paddle, so it has those same control issues that I was talking about with the Pro Ultimate. In fact, I actually think this is a little bit more powerful, so slightly less controlled. That higher power is part of the reason why I have it at number 1, but I also think that feel is a little bit better on this paddle as well. Feel is a big personal preference thing though, so these are both excellent power paddles, and I'm definitely not going to fight you if you think this should be number 1. The other thing with these that I didn't actually talk about in the Pro Ultimate section is spin. A trampoline effect doesn't just amplify power, it also amplifies spin, and spin is something you can use for control as well. These create tons of power on drives, but you're able to keep the ball between the lines because they have the spin to match it. Again, that is more useful in the hands of advanced players because spin requires more advanced technique. So basically, these paddles are elite at everything if you're good enough to handle them. And there's no shame in not being good enough. Every sport has gear that's a little bit less user-friendly for intermediates and beginners. If you play with these and you don't quite have the level, you're only going to be fighting a losing battle. So again, I only recommend these if you know what you're getting into. The Pulse and the Genesis in particular are much more user-friendly. So those are the ones I would go for if you want lot more power, but not this uncontrollable power. Again, uncontrollable in quotes, because you definitely can control these. That is going to be it for this top 5 though. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. And remember that if you want to demo any of these paddles, you can come visit us in store, or if you want to buy them, you can go online at racketsandrunners.ca.